The story is called 3 Hours Between Planes and talks about Donald Plant. Donald was mood, healthy, and bored. He was in a plane, and when the plane landed, he stepped out into a western summer night. Uh, the story does not mention the name of the city. He takes time to look at the phone book for her father, and Donald thinks that he might be dead in that 20 years without him. In some moment, he asks for Nancy Holmes, and a woman's a mouse voice answers that Miss Nancy is Mrs. Walter Gifford. Now, Donald does not answer anything. He only hang up. Donald had only 3 hours before the next flight. He had time, and he decided to call to Mr. Gifford's house, and he asked for Mrs. Gifford. She answered, and Donald said to him that he had not seen since they were 12 years. Mr. Gifford reacts surprised, and she invites Donald to visit her. During the way to Nancy's house, Donald starts wondering how Nancy's life will be. After that, when he arrives to the house, first all was silent between them because he was scared and he does not have anything to say. But then they start talking about Mr. Gifford. Mr. Gifford was a man who traveled a lot, and Nancy said that probably Mr. Gifford has loved someone else in New York, a city which he visited a lot, but she's not sure about that. Donald told she that it's better life without jealous. He talks about the experience with his wife, who passed out a few years ago. The experience was good. After that, they continued talking, and then Donald told her that he loved when they were children, and Nancy answered the same. And after that, the conversation took another way. Nancy started talking about many experiences between she and Donald, but Donald said that he does not remember those experiences that Nancy describes with a lot of detail. Um, and Nancy mentioned that she has an album with some pictures of that moment. And then, while Nancy was looking for the book for the album, Donald started thinking about two things. The first, in some moment, she loved he as soon as he loves she. And the second one, why he does not remember the moments who Nancy described with a lot of clarity. In that moment, he feels something similar to what they feel when his wife lived. Nancy returns with the album, and before they start looking them, she kissed Donald. In that moment, Donald was too confused. He can recognize if that moment was real or not. Donald started talking about the possibility of being in love again, but she stopped him. Nancy said that it's all over. After that, Donald told Nancy to don't say anything to her husband. Nancy accepted that. Then Donald asks for another kiss, but in that moment, Nancy opens the album and places the finger in one picture, and she said, "Here are you, and I remember this moment." Donald was confused, and he said, "That's not me. He is Donald Bowers." Nancy says, "But you are Donald Bowers." After this moment, they discuss, and Donald asks her if she can remember he, but she can't. Nancy told him to get out and returns to the airport, and she asked to never talk about that story. During the way to the airport, Donald was confused and he can digest the bad experience that he lived. Um, in my opinion, this story is too short. I think it's too strange because it's impossible to confuse two people. It doesn't matter if they are children or they have similar names. Nancy was the only the only way that I can understand this story is because the story mentioned that Nancy was drinking all the time. So I think it's the only reason to try to understand this story. Um, all the all the stories of Fitzgerald talks about uh, experiences of lives and gives details and ends too strange.